Julie Ann Crommett is founder and CEO of Collective Moxie. Please welcome Julie Ann to the stage.
Hello, Autodesk. How are you doing? Oh, you can do better than that. I know we're post-lunch. How are you doing? That's what I like to hear. Hi, everyone. As we dive into this conversation around the future of work, we have to talk about storytelling. And we've been talking about it all week in different ways and shapes, but we have to talk about it from an inclusive lens. Stories that are by everyone and for everyone. And it's key because otherwise, how do we understand our place in the world and everybody around us and their place in the world? So a little bit about me. My name is Julie Ann Crommett Pardo Webb Gonzalez Moses Niclu. I am a very proud Latina, born in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and I'm also Cuban American. And I share this because I think so much of our stories start with ourselves and our lived experience. My pronouns, by the way, are she, her, and ella, bilingually. And the other important thing when we think about storytelling is our why. Why do we want to tell a story? Why are we the person to tell that story? And so as I go through the presentation today, I always like to center in the why for me. And my why is actually this gentleman you see here, Paquito Pardo, or Paco Pardo. He's actually my late godfather. He passed away when he was 37 years old of a massive heart attack. I am also 37, by the way. That is my current age. And that's me and my brother on the left. And why he was so instrumental to me and my why is not only because he was dear as a relative, but he was also an actor and a movie critic. And he was the first person that ever taught my brother and me that storytelling was a profession, that you could do it, that you could make a living doing it. And honestly, it actually influenced my brother and me in both of our careers. He's actually a cinematographer and DP in the documentary world, and I do what I do around inclusive storytelling. By the way, I've been a practitioner for over 14 years, so at this point, I'm now considered OG. And this is my other why. Anybody here recognize Betty La Fea, or Ugly Betty, played by the incomparable America Ferrera? Yes. So that is also me on the other side here in high school, actually scanned in from a physical photograph. And Betty is actually the first time I ever saw myself represented on screen in 2006. I had to wait till I was in college to see myself represented. For some people, it hasn't even happened yet. And it was the first time that I saw a Latina who worked in a workforce and workplace that wasn't built or designed around her cultural experience or the way that she grew up, but she didn't have to choose. She went home to her loud, Latin, awesome family that looked a lot like mine, and also succeeded in her creative endeavors in her career. And for me, that was unlocking. I didn't know how much I needed to see Betty. And so when I think about and talk about inclusive storytelling, I want us to remember that shouldn't every single person in the world at some point have a moment where they see their Betty, where they see themselves reflected on screen and can understand at some level their place in the world and that they belong. And so, speaking of belonging, I always like to back up before we dive into inclusive storytelling on definitions because we've heard a lot of these words, and I always like to level set because, as the sound of music says, let's start at the very beginning because it's a very good place to start. So how many have seen these words, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, thrown around? Yes, most of you. I like to use Vernee Meyer's definition. Vernee is now the former head of diversity inclusion at Netflix and is an esteemed colleague in this space. And she says, diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance, and belonging is that your music is played and you can boogie. I like to add that part. And so being invited to the party, right? Being asked to dance, and that your music is played. Equity asks the question, who's hosting the party? Who's doing the inviting? Who's the DJ? And so when we've heard of these terms, equality, equity, and justice, how many of you have heard of any of these terms before? Great. You can actually Google this on Google image search. It's one of my favorite images to qualify between these terms as well. So as you can see here from the image, equality meets people with the exact same information or help without accounting for what they individually might need. Equity asks the question, what does each person need, meets people where they are, right, in this case, to look over the fence. And justice asks the question, why is there a problem in the first place? And addresses that, which is actually, in this case, the design of the fence. And then unconscious bias. How many of you have heard of this term, or implicit bias? Yeah. I like to use the definition that unconscious biases are the results of shortcuts that our brain takes because of the amount of data we have to process at any given moment. So I'm going to say that again. It's the result of shortcuts that our brain takes because of the amount of data we have to process at any given moment. Our brains are a little lazy, and they like to make shortcuts. And guess where a lot of those shortcuts come from? The images we have consumed over the years about ourselves and others. That is where stereotypes and tropes come from. So that's why we're going to talk about inclusive storytelling and why it's critical to the future of work. So what is inclusive storytelling? Inclusive storytelling considers for historical tropes, erasure, or non-existence, and stereotypes, and actively remedies it through collaborative and inclusive teams, dramaturgy, and dialogue. And for those who maybe didn't grow up in the theater, dramaturgy is about what is functioning in a text or story, and how is that meeting the audience that that text is engaging with, right? And so when we think about storytelling that considers for all of these things, we can talk about essentially breaking or maybe remolding a cycle of influence. Remember how I said those unconsciouses and implicit biases are often driven by what we consume, the images and narratives we've consumed over time? So as you can see here, the media we consume can drive perceptions of ourselves and others. I'm going to use an example in a little while to illustrate this, which can have a direct impact on the audience or potential storytellers, because I believe every single one of us is a storyteller. And that either leads to creative innovation or the lack thereof. And so these are some of the projects that I've worked on over the years to try to combat all of those negative stereotypes or maybe get in a more inclusive storytelling future. Anybody see things they like or have engaged with on this? Yeah. I'm going to talk, spoiler alert, I'm going to talk about Pray and Encanto in just a minute. And the other reason that we do this is not, by the way, just because it's the right thing to do, right? And that it connects to combating, right, the stereotypes and the tropes that we have consumed. And also because, guess what? Everybody wants to feel like they belong. But that there's also a business case. And this is actually from the study this year from the World Economic Forum. Fresh data, if you want to take a picture of this slide, highly recommend. 83% of executive leaders and investors were willing to pay a 10% premium on average to acquire a company with a positive ESG record. 39% of job seekers are now turning down or deciding not to pursue a job because of perceived lack of inclusion. That's 40% almost. Ethnically diverse companies and gender diverse companies are 36 and 25% more likely, respectively, to financially outperform organizations that are average within their industry. And 60% of employees now expect the CEO to speak publicly about social and political issues. So questions around inclusive storytelling and belonging are sitting at the heart of our business world today and around success within that world. So remember I mentioned in the cycle of influence that storytelling impacts what we believe? This is maybe most famously studied around CSI, or crime scene investigators. How many of you have seen CSI or one of the 4 CSIs that has come out? Perfect. The original was set right here in Las Vegas. When CSI premiered in the year 2000, 5 years later, there was a 50% increase in forensic science majors in the United States and United Kingdom. And has now been studied by social scientists as the CSI effect because there was an over-indexing of women who decided to pursue forensic science. The show was centered around forensic science. And so the CSI effect has actually led forensic science to be, still today, the only STEM career that has gender parity. And we see this effect now playing out in things that have come after it, like Shuri in Black Panther, who I had the pleasure of working on that character, Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, and many other shows. And so, remember I also said I talk about Prey and Encanto? So in these examples, it's about thinking about inclusive story at the intersection with science in a slightly different way. So with Prey, anybody here see Prey, the Predator prequel? How many people enjoyed it? Oh yeah, same hands, yes. If you haven't seen it, it's pretty dang good. So Prey is a sequel to the Predator franchise. And the director, who's a self-proclaimed straight cis white guy, said, I really want to center it on a young Comanche Native American woman. And she's going to be the central character that fights the predator. And it's going to be set in the time period of essentially Western colonization in the United States, where tribes were getting essentially removed, right, from their land. And so he said, I can't tell this story alone. Smart man. So he went and found an amazing producer, Jeannie, who you see in the picture here, who herself is part Comanche, and she actually joined him in producing the film. They hired Comanche actors to be the central characters in the film. For those who have watched it, have you watched the Comanche dub? Anybody? Anybody listen to the Comanche dub? A few hands? Okay. So they actually fully dubbed the film in Comanche, which is the first feature film that has ever been dubbed fully into Comanche. And they put it up on Hulu at the same time that they put the English language dub up. But they did something different in the delivery. Because the language was so important to the tribe, and also actually, quite frankly, to the creative, they said, we don't want it in a drop-down menu on the platform. We want a tile for the Comanche dub that sits right next to the English language tile. And so you don't have to go looking for it. It's right there. And so you can see it right there on the main page, Prey Comanche dub. This increased engagement with the title overall, and Prey actually was the #1 film ever opening weekend on Hulu, and remains to be. So an incredible story of how you can use a platform technology to intersect with content. The other stories around Encanto. Any Encanto fans in the room? Oh yes, oh yeah, I see many hands, love it. By the way, we're still talking about Bruno. I don't know why. We were told not to. But I got to work on this film for 4 years in my time at Disney. It's one of the biggest blessings of my career. And something most people don't know is a material science intersection that happened around inclusive storytelling. So when the consumer products team encountered Encanto for the first time, it was actually the first animated movie, I think ever, don't quote me, but I believe ever, that had this diversity of skin tones and hair textures in one film. And they said, well, wait a second. When you print color on plastic versus cotton versus other materials, the saturation level changes. We don't have a process necessarily to account for that. And in this case, we absolutely can't mess it up for a host of reasons, because you have to have all the characters next to each other. They have to look in fidelity with their original animation. So they created a new process. Now, for every single character that goes through the Disney Consumer Products process, there are at least 4 Pantone colors assigned by character to match the material they're going to be printed on. So not only was it about the inclusive storytelling actually in the story itself, but also how it was actually perceived in the marketplace by consumers, and creating a process to connect the dots. And then the third area I want to talk about is that you can't do this alone. Being an inclusive storyteller, you all know, you've been here all week, you do this on a regular basis, many of you. Storytelling is a team sport. There is nothing we have ever watched that was made by only one person. It was made by a team. And so I'm going to put another hat on as part of the presentation and share that I sit on the board of an incredible organization called WIA, or Women in Animation, womeninanimation.org. And fresh off the presses, by the way, WIA, as of Friday, is now an official UNESCO acknowledged organization. We're officially partnering them with which is the UN, and we are the first animation, VFX, or gaming organization to be a partner with UNESCO. So super excited to share that. And our goal is around gender parity and justice within the animation and VFX and gaming spaces. So if you're sitting in any of those spaces, we could be a partner for you on the pathway to inclusive storytelling. A bit about our numbers, we're over 11,000 members globally. We're on every continent but Antarctica. We're still recruiting the penguins. Yes, 82,000 followers on social media, and you can see all the rest of the numbers here. And several of the different ways to get involved with WIA are around advocacy. So we're every year at the Annecy Animation Summit. For those of you who come, we do a Gender Justice Day on the first day of the Annecy World Summit every year. We also are involved in publishing research with the University of Southern California's Annenberg School and their inclusion initiative. They do all the reports around Hollywood that you might have seen in the press. Please check out our animation study from 2019 and our visual effects global study from 2021 for our latest data. We hope to do a gaming study soon as well. You can get involved with us around talent development. So if you're looking for talent that identifies as women or gender non-binary across the gender spectrum, we have everything from a talent database to access. We have a mentorship program to be a mentee or a mentor, and we also have scholarships for those who are still in school. So we're here as a community and as a partner to you on sort of multiple levels. And always in alignment with this idea that we are better together, and a more inclusive storytelling world in animation, VFX, and gaming impacts everybody in a positive way. So with that, I'm going to leave you with what you can do. Commit to a plan. Why do you want to tell this story? Why you? Why the group of people? Remember, the director of Prey, he asked the question, and he said, I can't do this alone. I need to do this with a team of people who are also close to the culture that we're exploring. Who else should be at the table? Is WIA a potential partner? Is there an organization that can help you drive toward that more inclusive story, or maybe to find people to team up with? How are you delivering it to the audience? Remember in Prey, they actually changed where the Comanche dub was available in order to sort of equalize it, right, with the English language, and it led to huge results on the platform. And get creatively excited. This stuff is cool. Write a plan, because what it's about is about opportunity. This is all about opportunity. So I'm going to leave you with one thing, which is, what are you going to commit out of today, just one thing, in your organization or in your work to drive a more inclusive storytelling future? And remember that at the end of the day, it's because everybody deserves their Betty. Thank you so much.